And so because of that divergence, because they have this conception of God, or they have had that experience in the past, they try to create different structures and things to access God or to curry God's favor or whatever it might be, so that they can live in relationship with God. And his whole point through these different lessons is that the way that they relate to God is not optimal in a lot of times. And so the first way that's not optimal is living life under God. And so it's this kind of fear-based relationship with God, that you would be scared of angering God, and so you need to do everything you can to please God, live in a way that is perfect, that pleases him all the time, and therefore God has nothing to be upset with you about, and therefore you won't anger him, and you'll be blessed by him. Did anybody else catch anything from the video they thought would be helpful to share? Anybody who missed the video? I guess the other thing that he kind of talks about is this idea of morality, and so a lot of this is caged in terms of morality. When you're thinking this way, that if you are acting in ways that displease God, you'd call it being immoral, and so being moral is the purpose of your life. You need to live morally, because otherwise you'll anger God and that. And so, as we go through these different relationships with God, it'll be important to understand that it's not that none of this is right. Okay, we should fear God. We should live under God's rule and under His authority. We should behave in moral ways, but a lot of it just kind of gets back to the why. Why are we doing these things, and are we properly aligning our lives to do that kind of stuff? Okay. So let's first look to the Bible in Matthew chapter 23, because Jesus encounters a group of people frequently in his ministry who kind of exemplify this pattern of living a life under God and in fear of him and violating his commands. And so these people were called Pharisees. Does anybody remember who the Pharisees were? What was their role in Israel? Who were these guys and gals? Yeah. Sing it, Jeff.
They didn't like they were against the Roman leaders, but they resisted peacefully.
Yeah. So they are they're Jews who aren't cooperating with the Roman leaders. Okay. So Sadducees are the Jewish leaders who are cooperating with the Roman leaders. Okay. So if you were to just pick a random Sadducee out of the bucket, where would you imagine that they would probably live? Yeah, near Jerusalem, maybe Caesarea, right? The capital, the Roman capital of this area. They would live in the places of power, and they would be near the people who are powerful, and they would also be wealthy themselves. And the Pharisees, if you were to pick a random Pharisee out, where would they probably be living? Yeah, somewhere else, right? Somewhere where you can kind of preach to your synagogue. You can say, hey, we are not okay with these Romans. We are waiting for the Messiah. He's going to cast off these oppressors, and then we'll usher in this new time of peace. And how do you, if you're a Pharisee, how do you usher in the Messiah? How do we usher in God's new covenant, this new kingdom?
Following all the law.
Yeah, keeping the law, right? So God kicked us out of the land, and we experienced the curse of the law because we didn't follow these things. Now that we are back in the land, we've been restored to the land, God is just waiting for us to perfectly obey the Torah, and then He will send this time of refreshment, right? This new kingdom. Okay. So let's read here. Can somebody read Matthew 23, 23 to 28? this is in response to a tithing law in Deuteronomy. And so Deuteronomy 14:22 says, set aside a tenth of all that your fields produce each year. Okay? And so the idea of tithing the mint, dill, and cumin is like even the tiniest, your little garden in your windowsill maybe, where you're growing your herbs for cooking. You're so concerned about following the law that you make sure, okay, I'm going to count, okay, I got 20 dill plants here, 2 of those will be tithed, and I'll bring those to the temple as part of my offering. Okay, it's like that's a high concern for following the letter of this law. Okay? Is that bad?
Yes.
Yes, it's bad. Everybody else is shaking their head no. Why do you think it is bad?
It's a control system.
Mm.
It looks good, it balances, it gives you a profit loss type report and all that business. Helps you monitor and control people. And really, it's just a human system. And it's bad. And, the grace of God said, there's no control system here. You're already committed as a sinner. You've taken care of the sin, you can live free.
Okay.
No control, no monitoring, no breathing down your neck and everything. I mean, especially when you consider the alternative, it's very bad. The law system is very bad. And you can't go back to it.
Okay. So somebody that defends this idea of tithing, yes?
In the beginning, it was not bad. It was the people who made it bad. They hardened their hearts. They forgot the whole just of what God was doing. You're supposed to take care of this, and then, without neglecting it, you should be doing the others.
Yeah.
And they weren't. They were hardened hearts. They were all for show.
Yeah. And I mean, you both were saying the same thing, right? It's that this is bad because you've lost focus on the weightier matters. That's what Jesus says.
I'm saying, no matter how you rehabilitate the people, monitor it, it's still a bad system. If it doesn't operate from the heart,
Mm-hmm.
There's an example when they're trying to build not the temple, but they're trying to build the sanctuary, the tabernacle. And Moses had to stop, say, whoa, we've got enough. You've given more than we need. That was the attitude that they had, that tithe nothing, I want to give more than that
Mm-hmm.
to God's purposes. And it's one of the shining examples of where they gave more than was needed.
I'm sorry, I stepped out, but so I may not come back into some context, but wasn't also the contributions to tithing also to support the priests that had no land and no way to prove stuff?
Yeah, so remember, priests, they don't have a territory, but they do have land. So the priests, they get, the Levites get cities, and so they'll have some land to support themselves. But yes, the tithing is to support temple activities, it's to support Levites, it's to support the marginalized, it's to support anybody who doesn't have quite enough, is the whole point of the system. And so to kind of summarize, it's not that the tithing in itself is corrupt in some way. It's that when you're doing it for control, you're doing it so that you can get this checkbox kind of attitude that I've fulfilled my obligation and now we're done, but not realizing, like Jesus says here, you've neglected the weightier provisions of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. But he says here very clearly, these are the things you should have done without neglecting the others. Okay? So he says it's not that you shouldn't tithe, but you have to focus on what actually matters in this law, which is the justice and the mercy and the faithfulness to your God, to the one who's overseeing all these things. So I want this, I kind of approach all of my studies this way. I don't want this to be the rah-rah session of how we're saying, yeah, we never do this kind of stuff, and those people are bad. Let's turn the lens onto ourselves. What kind of religious practices do you have, do you think, that sometimes fall into this category of obligatory obedience? That they're things that you feel like you have to do, that you should do, and if you don't do, God's going to punish you, or you're going to suffer some sort of wrath.
I think when I look at it, and I used to do exactly what you're saying, man, he's terrible, isn't he? And as I started to mature in the Word, God brought me to the place to say, look, I'm telling you these stories because this is the story of man. This is the story of humanity. This is your story. I have, as a person, as a human being, I have a propensity or however, whatever word you want to say, towards self-righteousness. What I want to do, like you're saying, checking the boxes, and also what the other brother is saying, like looking down on other people. You know, to say, oh, thank God I'm not like this sinner or this tax collector. I give a tenth of all that I get. You know, instead of doing that, and what the man say, the other one, he wouldn't even look up. He'd leave his breast and say, forgive me, Lord, I'm a sinner. You know, and there's another occasion where he says, Jesus says, you know, he heals a blind man, and they say, what, are we blind too? And he says, well, now that you claim that you can see, your guilt remains. It's like, oh my goodness. So should I identify as a sinner and as a blind person? And says, well, you know, let's not go too far. You know, how do I say I can be? I'm subject to be a sinner. I'm subject to be blind. Lord, give me eyes to see. And Lord, give me a heart, not of self-righteousness, but to produce the righteousness that comes from the faithfulness, not neglecting justice, mercy, and being an advocate of justice and mercy. You know, and what you teach and what you do to your children, to your family, to your community, to try to have a heart like David for God, and to try to be his children, and to be like God, and do the things that he does.
Mm-hmm.
I have an aunt who boasted that in 18 years she had not missed a day of church. Whenever the doors were open, she was there. And it was that, you had to know her, but that was a checkbox mentality for her. That was her shining star, if you will, that she had checked that box for 18 years straight.
Yeah. And church attendance is, I was kind of thinking about this, and I kind of think of it like my children. Like, I want my children to do the right thing because it's the right thing, and to follow after God long after they leave my household. And to do that, I need to get them to church. And at the beginning, it's going to be, they're kind of feel like this is just like a checkbox, like, or that like, this is something that we always do. I don't really understand why. And part of it is that when you go and assemble with this congregation here, it's doing something to you, and so you should be here for it. But when it becomes less than that, right? When it becomes just a thing that I'm supposed to do and I'm coming just to do it, just to check the box, then I think you can. It's still going to do something to you, but I think you're going to miss out on the fullness of what it is about you and shaping you.
Well, the positive motivation would be, given my blessings in Christ, given my status, how could I not want to be with other Christians, God's people?
Mm-hmm.
How could I miss that?
Right.
In light of what I've been given.
Yeah, and I think when it turned, like the first indication is the pride in a lot of ways. When these things go awry, is you start feeling like, man, I am killing it. I'm nailing this church thing. I've really got it down. And that's that's a good indication that, oh, I got something wrong in my heart. And that's a tough thing because the pride itself prevents you from seeing your own pride, right? That's kind of what pride does. Randy, you had something?
Oh, I was just going to say, with all of those things, I mean, every aspect of it is open to, autopilot religion versus active participation. You get the, what is it, Hebrews 9 or 10 or whatever, about don't neglect the assembly. Well, that doesn't mean I'm going and getting my gold stars on the little chart, and at the end I get one in the pride box. It means active participation in worship. I don't think God said don't neglect it, like, make sure you got perfect attendance because you get a certificate. It's don't neglect it because you get so much out of it and you're around fellow Christians. And so, yeah, I think the litmus test on all that stuff is the motivation, the foundation of it. It's easy to kind of look down on yourself and say, well, I'm dragging my kids to this because I want them to understand that, going is beneficial, and now it feels, very repetitive and redundant, but it's at the base level is your drive behind it is, well, why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I've experienced it and I know what it'll do. So even if it feels like fake it till you make it and they're not into it yet, I understand what it leads to.
The worst of all, it seems to me, is evangelism. We beat ourselves over the head and say, we're not doing enough for evangelism. I'm just not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. And I feel bad about it. But then why would I want to make a convert who then will feel as bad about evangelism as I do? So it has to spring from the joy of life in Christ.
If we keep looking, so we read this part, but Jesus calls the Pharisees whitewashed tombs, right? Which is not a compliment. It's this, you look good on the outside, but it's rotten and dying on the inside. Their acts of worship are meaningless until they repent of this sin. What does Jesus' sharp tone communicate to you about the importance that he places on this life where your inner life matches the outward life? What's that look like today?
I think God wants your heart.
What's that look like in real terms?
It's giving yourself to God in the wholeness of your being, not just for perception. One of the things he criticizes, he says, everything you do is for show, for the glory. You want the glory of other people. And see, that's wasn't where God wanted their heart to be. He said, hey, you make your tassels, your phylacteries wide, and your tassels long. You stand on the corner and you do all the things you do are for show. And so what are we seeking? Are we seeking the approval and the glory of people? Or are we seeking the glory and the approval of God? I mean, there's nothing wrong with seeking the glory and approval of God, like you're saying, and to fear God. And Jesus said, I always do what pleases the Father. So we want to strive to do that, but what is the motive? Like the brother was saying, the motive is in the heart, that my heart and all of my soul belongs to God. And that's like the first commandment. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. I belong to him. I'm bought with a price. And I'm here to do his will and to find out what that will is. The analogy everybody's talking about as a child, right? It says, train up your child in the way they should go. And when they're old, they won't depart. So at that maturity level, when we're new Christians, we need to learn how to do things in a rudimentary way because we haven't matured yet. We don't really totally understand, and that's okay. You're doing this thing because God tells you. I'm doing it because God tells you to. But as we grow, we understand. We come to understand the heart of God, and that our heart and our soul and our mind and our strength is going to merge to be one.
it sounds like it's a very messy beginning, that we just need to be doing the things that Jesus has asked us to do, in obedience, maybe even in fear at the beginning, just to trust, to obey, to do these things. And as we grow in that, it drives out the fear, and it actually creates this match between the inner self and this outer appearance. The other thing that I want to emphasize here is that as you're thinking about this, it's like, well, what does Jesus want from these guys? Right? They're whitewashed tombs. They're full of corruption, right? So their inner life is not matching their outer life. They're spending all their time whitewashing the tomb, right? Keeping it clean and orderly and of the best appearances. They dress up the tombs of the prophets, right? They want it to seem like the prophets are honored here, even though they're not. And so, like, what I think Jesus wants is for them to do some work cleansing the inside, right? Which means they're going to get their hands dirty, which means it's not going to look as nice. They're going to have to, I don't know what it looks like to remodel a tomb, but the whole idea here is that is resurrection, right? He wants them not to be dead inside, but to be alive again. But that is going to take getting some dirty hands. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, what does that look like in your life? Practically, it's like, I need to confess my sins to my brothers and sisters so that they can hold me accountable, and it's like, that's a kind of death, right? It's like, I have this, I look nice, I look okay, but I'm not okay, and I need to tell people about that, and that's why we don't do it as often as we should, is this scariness of the dissonance between the inside and the outside. But that's what it looks like, is like getting dirty and then getting to work and making the inside match the outside. So we're not full of death, but full of life, and then the outside, we can just see that. We don't have to pretend.
The Hebrew system of laws and regulations had created buildings that were just absolutely spectacular in grandeur and size, but they were completely whitewashed on the outside, and inside they were full of dead men's bones. It doesn't matter how much you clean up a mausoleum or a vault, it's still dead men's bones. And the effort that you put into it, regardless of how noble your effort is, you're just still whitewashing a constructed edifice that's long dead and without purpose. And Jesus says, walk away, carry a burden, but it's a light burden, and I'll carry the burden with you. Come to me, living water is available, access to God as the whole edifice is walked away from. You don't go back. That's the book of Hebrews. So many Jews wanted to go back and reconstruct the edifice. And Jesus said, you've tasted the good things. This is where you have to make a decision. You're looking back on a building? Really? That's where you want to invest your time? There's no investment there. All the riches are in Jesus Christ.
I read in a commentary before that one of the things that they would do is during like major festivals, they would scrub down all the tombs and the mausoleums and all that with lime, so that it was readily noticeable, so nobody would touch it, so they wouldn't become unclean, right? It wouldn't accidentally fall into
get rewards for appearing whitewashed, right? For appearing nice, and that's what Jesus says throughout this whole Sermon on the Mount. That's Jesus' constant message. Like, you're going to receive your reward in full. Unfortunately, it's a very temporary reward.
So, well, what it looks like today, I think, Hebrews came to mind. Hebrews 13 says, a sacrifice of praise. So instead of a goat, I give a sacrifice of praise. I think that's referring back to Hosea, the fruit of our lips. So where the Pharisees, like if they were to bring someone to God, they would say, okay, you have to be circumcised, you have to do this and that, and give a whole list of to-dos. But I think for what it would look like for us would be like, this is why we do what we do. God is awesome, Jesus did this. Giving praise instead of giving a list of to-dos. I think that's what it would look like. And also like being a living sacrifice. So instead of I gave my 10%, now I'm done. Like if I gave my 10% to the church already, but then my neighbor got really sick and she needs a meal, that would be an extra sacrifice that was outside of that 10%. So I think that's what it would look like, is not giving, checking the boxes like everyone's saying, but giving when it's needed. Not, I guess, as an obligation, but as a living sacrifice.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think if you're careful and attentive, then you're going to see the areas and people in your life where you can make a difference in justice and righteousness and faithfulness to help someone or to bless someone or to bring that into their life. And if your whatever religious practice is getting in the way of doing those things, then I think you're in this situation, right? You're in this situation where you have set up this system of controls, but it's not getting at the heart of what God actually wants in your life, which is these three core ideas that Jesus presents here. So that's a great test to figure out are my priorities aligned correctly, and if this system that I've set up has pushed out all these other things that I probably should or could be doing, then it's the wrong system. We need to revisit it.
Ephesians 2, 8 to 10 puts it really simply, saved to serve. And you adopt that mindset, I'm saved, I've been saved to serve. I'm not serving in order to get salvation.
Right, absolutely. Although,
Well, you know, Jesus said in Matthew 18, verse 2 through 4, and it states that to enter the kingdom of heaven, you must become like a little child. You know, have that mindset. I mean, that's pretty good.
yeah, absolutely. Yep, and I think a lot of that is that you are to pattern your life after the Father and after His Son.
Yeah.
That's what children do. They imitate. They become the one they look up to. Okay. Thank you for your attention this week. Watch the second video. If you're having trouble accessing the Right Now Media thing, come talk to me and I'll get you all set up. Thanks.